Sometimes a single day in politics can feel like an entire week just got crammed into 24 hours. Well, we're about to break down one of those days, November 14th, 2025. In just one day, we saw a presidential order that sparked a huge firestorm, a major U-turn on economic policy, and this tangled web of corruption allegations. So let's try to make some sense of all the chaos.
I mean, this was a whirlwind, from the White House to Congress and everywhere in between. It was just this rapid-fire series of events. We're talking about everything from international trade to alleged corruption, and even a bitter feud that just erupted inside the Republican Party. So let's unpack the timeline of this pretty extraordinary day.
All right, let's dive right in. The day really kicked off with an explosive, and I mean highly controversial, order from the president. One that immediately threw the Department of Justice right into the middle of a political dogfight. So here's exactly what happened. President Trump ordered his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to investigate political opponents, specifically opponents whose names showed up in those newly released Epstein documents. And he even singled out former President Bill Clinton and former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers by name. And the response from the Justice Department? It came, well, immediately. Attorney General Bondi put out a statement saying her department was on it and promising to pursue the investigation with, and I'm quoting here, urgency and integrity. Okay, but to really get why this caused such an uproar, you have to look at the context, which critics jumped on right away. First, President Trump's own name is all over those same documents. Second, the connections he was pointing to, they've been reported in the media for years. This wasn't exactly new information. And third, the DOJ had already looked into this before and decided there wasn't enough evidence to go after these folks. So you can probably guess what happened next. Critics immediately called it a classic deflection. The group Midas Touch put it bluntly, calling it a major scandal and arguing the president was basically using his power to go after his enemies and distract everyone from his own name being in those same files. But believe it or not, the day was just getting started. While the entire political world was trying to process that DOJ order, the administration pulled a complete 180 on one of its signature economic policies. I mean, this was a huge reversal. After years of defending tariffs, President Trump signed an executive order to get rid of them on all sorts of goods, like beef and coffee. And the official reason? To try and lower prices for everybody, because voters were getting really concerned about the economy. Well, the reaction from Democrats was pretty sharp. Congressman Richard Neal basically dismissed the whole thing. He said the administration was, in his words, putting out a fire that they started and claiming it as progress. And just when you think that's got to be it for one day, nope. A whole series of investigative stories also broke, and each one seemed to paint this really troubling picture of questionable deals, raising some serious red flags about corruption. So let's start with this number, $220 million. What's that about? Well, it's at the very center of a bombshell report about a massive ad campaign being run by the Department of Homeland Security. So that $220 million was the total cost of a campaign led by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. But get this, here's the real kicker. A huge piece of that pie, $143 million, went to a company called Safe America Media, a company that was reportedly created just days before the contract was handed out. And it didn't take long for reporters to start pulling on the threads. And what did they find? Well, for starters, the whole competitive bidding process was just skipped. Then it turns out a key subcontractor was run by the husband of Secretary Noem's own spokesperson. And on top of all that, Noem's top advisor, Corey Lewandowski, had worked for that exact same subcontractor in the past. For one expert on federal contracting, this wasn't some gray area. Charles Teifer, who knows this stuff inside and out, looked at all the evidence and told ProPublica, simply, it's corrupt is the word. And the hits just kept coming. It wasn't just the DHS. Another report detailed this pretty major break from protocol over at the FBI. The director, Kash Patel, apparently waived the required polygraph exams for his deputy director and 2 other senior staffers. And this isn't just paperwork, you know? That test is a huge part of getting top security clearance. It's how they check for things like foreign contacts or anything that could be used for blackmail. And then, just to add another wild layer to the day, news breaks that the Department of Justice is talking about settling a $50 million lawsuit from Michael Flynn. Right, the same former national security advisor that Trump had already pardoned. Now he was suing the government for damages from the investigation into him in the first place.
So by the time evening rolled around, you'd think things might quiet down. Nope. That whole Epstein story that kicked everything off, it came boomeranging right back. Only this time it was causing a very public, very ugly fight inside the Republican Party. This time, President Trump himself goes on social media and just unloads on two Republican members of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, because they had supported releasing the Epstein files. He announced he was pulling his endorsement of Greene and just flat out called Massie a loser.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene, she did not take that lying down. She fired right back almost instantly with a really defiant statement. She said she'd supported the president, but, quote, I don't worship or serve Donald Trump. And then she accused him of trying to scare Republicans into blocking the release of the files.
So, wow. After a day of just total whiplash, how do you even begin to process all of this? Let's take a look at how some political observers tried to connect all these crazy dots.
For some, like Josh Marshall of Talking Points Memo, all this frenetic activity wasn't a sign of strength at all. It was a sign of desperation. He wrote that the president was, quote, drowning on every front, and that these moves were just the actions of an administration in deep crisis. But maybe the whole mood of the day was best captured by reporter Aaron Rupar. As he was watching all this unfold, he just captured this widespread feeling of chaos and disbelief with one simple, exasperated question, like, what are we doing here?
So when you step back and look at it, this one day, this single chaotic day, it packed in so many different controversies, from using the justice system as a potential weapon to these brazen allegations of corruption and a political party just turning on itself. It all leaves us with some really big and, frankly, unsettling questions about power, about accountability, and about the stability of the rule of law itself.